Why don't schools with deaf children become academies? This is the question I asked Paul Simpson of BATOD, British Association of Teachers of the Deaf. The question came after I was reading an article about academy schools and the benefits that they were bringing their pupils, and thought how many schools for the deaf have become academies. The answer, none so far. So why not? What are the pros and cons to becoming an academy? Luckily I was able to email Paul, who filled me in with some details. Academy schools were established in 2000 under Tony Blair with the aim of improving failing schools by getting outside sponsors to help fund and run them. Initially there were about 200, but the Academy Act 2010 allowed all state schools in England to become academies, enabling them to set teachers' wages and diverge from the national curriculum. This meant by August last year the number of academies had risen to over 1,000. So why aren't there any deaf academies? Surely the benefits would be welcomed. But my conversation with Paul showed that life isn't that simple. The problem as always comes down to money, geography and the deaf child. Deafness is a low incidence, high cost special educational need group, which is often clustered in certain areas. Deaf children are either statemented and attend a school for the deaf, or mainstream school, which means their funding is sent directly to that school, or they are not statemented, which means they are supported from a central pool managed by the LEA. Whilst this means that some schools may never have a deaf child, others may have 3 or more. It is this group of unstatemented children that will be impacted the most. The suggested school funding reforms mean that the funding for SEN children could be divided equally between schools regardless of how many high-cost SEN children they have. By dividing up the funding and giving it equally across schools, it means that those schools with unstatemented deaf children will get less money and less support. So does that mean academies are not the way forward for deaf children in deaf schools? Personally, I think that with more thought and more consultation, we might be able to get it to work. So who knows? In the future, maybe we could have a Deafax-run Deaf Academy school, transforming the lives of deaf children.